Hi everyone, this is Railmar from Darth Hater. Today I'll be going over the boss strategies for the Kaon Under Siege Flashpoint. This video will showcase the hard mode version of Kaon Under Siege. The group in this video consists of a power tech tank, an operative healer, a marauder, and an assassin. You can complete this Flashpoint with any combination of a tank, healer, and 2 DPS, but some setups are more optimal than others. I'll elaborate on that later on in the video. The first fight seen here is the Rakghoul Swarm. This encounter is triggered by activating a switch next to a gate. You'll see it glowing. Before you begin this fight, you want to have one player on the turret, usually a DPSer, but you can use anyone except the healer. Here they've used the assassin for the turret. Throughout the fight, waves of Rakghouls will spawn from both sides of your position, backed up by many of the special Rakghouls seen in the earlier phases of the Flashpoint. Each has a special ability that must be taken into account. The first type of mob you'll need to watch out for are the bloated plague bearers. These will explode when they get low on health. When this happens, they become invulnerable, and you'll have a few seconds to get away from them. If you don't get away in time, you'll be knocked back and take heavy damage. The second mob you'll have to worry about is the infected hunter. Hunters will leap to a random player and stun them, dealing a large amount of damage. The third special mob is the infected mercenary. These will grapple a random player with the constrict ability, which must be interrupted. Lastly, there's the infected screamers. These mobs have a knockback ability that deals significant damage. After several minutes, the fight will end. As you can see, it's a pretty straightforward fight with the exception of the special mobs. Here you can see an infected screamer beating on the healer. Constrict ability is interrupted and burned down. Now the group moves on to the second boss fight. The second boss fight is the Rakghoul Behemoth. For this fight, it's ideal to have a power tech or a vanguard tank, as they're far better at maintaining aggro while kiting. You'll want to kite the behemoth around in the plaza, luring him towards the explosive barrels in the corner seen here. These barrels respawn. The street lamps activate to let you know that there's a barrel ready for use. The boss itself doesn't do much sustained damage, but he does have a couple of special attacks. The first is a basic knockback ability. The second is a charge ability that boosts his damage. When his charge ability activates, the game will tell you to run. Just kite him until it wears off. Staying alive is more important than damaging him at this point. An optional mechanic to this fight is to use the auto turrets at the top of this map. You can activate them for additional damage on the boss, however you don't want to do this at the beginning of the fight, or the turrets will aggro the boss and he'll destroy them. As you can see here, the boss is just being kited around in the corners for the first half of the fight. The barrel has respawned. They're not activating it just yet. You'll see why in a second. The assassin runs up to activate the turrets at the top of the stairs. This way they can just kite him back and forth between the two barrels at the top corners, and the guns will fire on the boss for additional damage. You don't want to do this at the beginning of the fight, as I mentioned. As you can see, he's staying on the tank rather than aggroing the turrets. With the boss down and the final turrets activated, the third boss is now available. This third fight is actually optional. You activate it by bringing up the 6 turrets earlier in the instance. This fight is called the Expulsor Droid. You'll begin by pulling the droid a safe distance away from his original spawn to begin the fight. You'll see why in just a moment. This boss has a number of special attacks, including an AoE pull, which you just saw, and an AoE knockback. In addition, he deals significant point-blank AoE damage through his missile and energy surge attacks, so a ranged heavy group is preferable. When the boss gets to 60% health, 3 adds will spawn at his original location. If If you have two party members with long-term droid CC, these can be dealt with one at a time. You can see here the Marauder and the Operative broke off to CC two of the droids. These droids also do a fair amount of damage if they get close, so you'll be dealing with a lot of party-wide damage in the second half of this fight. At 30%, 3 more adds will spawn. As I mentioned, there is a lot of damage going on in the second half of the fight, so be careful of that. Again, a ranged heavy group is preferable for this since you'll be able to avoid a lot of the AoE damage. As I mentioned, at 30% he'll call in more droids, as you can see here. Again, the Marauder and the Operative break off to CC the droids. In this case, they only kill the first droid and leave the other two. The reason for this is that they're able to burn down the boss and deal with the two droids after. One thing to remember when you take down the boss, just make sure you don't forget about those two droids that you have CC'd. They don't despawn when the boss dies, so they are pretty formidable, even on their own, so be careful of that when you're with it. The final fight is the Rakghoul Super Soldiers encounter. This fight features 3 distinct bosses, Chagak, Legrath, and Giklard, or something. For the purposes of this video, I'll just be calling them Chak, Lek, and Gik. Lek is the commander, and near the beginning of the fight, he'll order the other two to attack one player. In this case, it's going to be the healer. You can see the healer kiting the bosses up the stairs, and he's just going to jump right back down into the fight once this is over, so the bosses will have to run back down. In this case, the group almost has the first boss down here. Lek should be nearly dead at this point. Once he dies, a wave of Rakghouls will spawn. These should be either AoE'd or CC'd. In this case, it's a combination of both. With the commander dead, the other two can be taunted. That's pretty important for this fight. In this case, the group focuses on Gik first, just because he has a heavy pin ability that he uses to CC a random player. Once he dies, another wave of Rakghouls respawns. Again, these should be AoE'd and or CC'd. Again, this fight's pretty straightforward. The second boss, the only thing you really have to worry about is that pin ability, which will CC a player. Here you can see the Rakghouls respawning again. Orbital Strike is going down to AoE them and knock them back. At this point, the group just focuses on burning Shag down. He's probably the easiest of the 3, and I would suggest doing it in this order. The Rakghouls are down. Now all that's left is to kill the boss. And that's it for Kaon Under Siege. Thanks for visiting DarthHater.com.